Hi, it's Paul, and in this video I'm an old man with some information on how I've gone from this, a handbag belonging to my wife, to this, which is pattern pieces to make an identical handbag. So a quick bit of background to the story. This is what was my wife's favourite handbag for some considerable time, and some time back I figured, right, what I'd like to do is make her, I've never made a bag before, but I decided I'd like to make her a different version of the bag with some different material. She liked the Highland cow theme before it became hugely mainstream, and so I found some material online, traced around the bag manually, figured out how it was put together, and cut out the pattern pieces and made it. So, long story short, then someone else, one of our other relatives, said, "Oh, that's really nice, could I have one of them?" So I was like, okay, I'll make another one. I'd still got the original pattern pieces, and so again what I did was I traced round the various components to figure out what I needed, worked out how it had been stitched together, and kind of reverse engineered it, if that makes sense. But I thought, well, if someone's going to ask me this again, what I actually want to do, rather than keeping loads of sort of hand-drawn patterns, which might be to everybody's taste but isn't to mine, I want to make this a digital pattern. And so I set about thinking, right, how do I go about that? And I struggled to find all the information online to how to do the process. So this video is a very basic, it is possible video. It's not really a how-to. It isn't me selling patterns, because I've no intention of doing that, nor is it me selling bags, because I've no intention of doing that either. This is just, actually, it fulfills two purposes. One is, next time I make one of these bags, it will help me. I can look at my own video and it'll remind me what I need to do, the steps I need to take. And two, it will provide the same for anybody else who's sat there thinking, oh, I wonder if I could do that. Well, the answer is, in this instance, yes, you can. You can take a bag, you can make the pattern on Affinity Designer for nothing. You can export it as a print file from that. I'm not dealing with that in this video, but if you want to know how, then just ask me. But I'm going to deal with taking it from Affinity Designer to Cricut Design Space and cutting the pattern pieces on a Cricut Maker 3, because that's what I've got. Doesn't deal with any other Cricut machinery, so if you ask me, will it work on a Cricut Joy, I've got no idea. So let's get on with it. The materials I'm using, the software I'm using is Affinity Designer. I have Affinity Designer 2, which I paid for. None of this is sponsored or whatever in association with. I don't really do that. You can now get Affinity Designer, or Affinity as it's just called, for nothing. And again, I've got no connection, I just know this exists and I have it. You can take out not a subscription, because you're not paying for it, but you can sign up for a login on Canva for Affinity. If you just Google Affinity, what you'll get is you'll get Affinity Designer, a version 3, and you can download it for nothing, provided you've got a login to the Canva system. A no-cost login. That's important. You can pay money. You can pay lots of money to Canva or lots of other people for subscriptions to things. I'm not a fan of subscription-based software, so I don't have any. As I say, I bought the lifetime Affinity Designer 2. I still have it. I still use it. But you can do exactly the same in Affinity Designer 3, which is free. I also use Cricut Design Space. And again, I do not have the subscription. This is the free low-level Cricut Design Space, Cricut Design Space, that just allows you to plot patterns onto a template that then allows you to cut them or make them on your Cricut Maker or whatever else, whichever version of Cricut you use. I have created the patterns in lining paper. Lining paper is stuff that you put on a wall to cover up the blemishes in your wall, cracks and deformations and stuff like that. Why have I used it? Because it's cheap. A 20-metre roll of this is about £5 UK. A 10-metre roll of Swedish tracing paper, which I also have, costs about £25 a roll. So per square metre, this is significantly cheaper, and it's quite robust. Again, that may not be to your liking, but if that's what you want to do, if you want to use Swedish type tracing paper or even copy paper or whatever you like, laser copy paper, all of those will work on the Cricut Maker. All you've got to do is think about how you're going to lay out your materials and your plan, which the Cricut Design Space will help you with. Again, maybe we'll talk about that when I get as far as Design Space, but let's begin at the beginning. And fair warning, this is going to be a long old video. In the edit process, I will put timestamps in at all the major points to try and explain, as I say, for no other reason really than when I come back to look at it and I want to remember, how did I get the file out of Affinity Designer into Cricut Design Space? I can just go to that timestamp and find it myself. If you want to use the timestamps, crack on. Right then, so put that back on the desk behind me, put the bag away. Okay, so flipping over to the computer screen, what we have then, if I go to Affinity Designer, I have a number of tabs on Affinity Designer. I've got main body, front and back, cover flap, pocket bag, cover flap, interfacing, main body interfacing, front patch, pocket. So they are all the different components of the bag that I built, that I've drawn up. Probably sounds better. So the bag consists of a main section, front and back, that are stitched together, and that in turn consists of a main fabric on the outside and a lining fabric on the inside, and also it consists of an interfacing. The interfacing is on a different drawing, but just to explain, here's the main body, front and back, and I've put my own instructions on here saying main body, front and back, main fabric cut 2, lining cut 2, set the box size to 230 by 180. What does that mean, Paul? Well, that means this box, the outer of the bag in my standard size, is down in this corner 230 millimeters by 180 millimeters. If I want to make a larger bag, I need to enlarge all the pieces proportionally, and again, that's a reminder to me that that's what I need to do, and I would do that over in Cricut Design Space. I don't do it in Affinity Designer. I could do, it makes no odds. I would need a larger workspace, artboard as they call it, and I can do either, but for me it's easier to do it over in Cricut Design Space. If you're not using Cricut Design Space and you're just going to print these out, it's dependent on the size of your piece of paper that you can print onto. You can print the capacity and blah 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 blah. Again, if you want a bit more information on that, drop a comment below and I'll do another video that explains that. So there is my main fabric, my main body, front and back. Again, it's got some marker points on it. That's where the zip position goes in the rear lining. That's where the attachment line is for the cover flap on the rear main section, because the cover flap goes on to, stitches onto the back of the bag, and on the inside of the bag there is the zip, and that's the zip position in the rear lining. Then we have the cover flap itself, which is a sort of horseshoe shape. Again, I did this in Affinity Designer because it's easier in Affinity Designer. I tried to figure out how to do this in Cricut Design Space directly. Couldn't figure out how to do it without actually signing up and getting an advanced subscription, which, let's not go over that story again, didn't want to do it. So built it in Affinity Designer, which allows me to do, it gives me much more freedom, and so on and so forth. So main body front and back, cover flap, pocket bag, cover flap interfacing. So those of you that sort of know this stuff a bit better may already have figured out, okay, so if we go back to the cover flap, what we've got is we've got our main piece of fabric, we've got our seam allowance, and then we've got our stitch line, and the interfacing is the same size as the stitch line. So all I've done is I've copied this inner line onto another page, and that is my cover flap interfacing, and I've added notes to suit. And the same with the main body interfacing. That is, there's the main body front and back, here's the size of my fabric, here's the 10mm seam allowance with a 6mm seam allowance in these two cut corners, and here is the inner stitch line, and all I've done to make the interfacing size is I've copied this stitch line onto another page, and that is my main body interfacing, and I've added center lines and blah 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 blah. Front patch pocket, I actually put both sections of the front patch pocket so you can actually see it in a little bit of detail here. Here's my actual front patch pocket, that's the material size. Then I've got my stitch line inside that, and all I've done is I've copied and pasted down here the stitch line, which then becomes my interfacing, and on this I've got a 6mm seam allowance, and I haven't noted that because I don't need to, because I've drawn it on the pattern. But if you want to add notes on your version, do what you like. Okay, here I made a mistake. I feel I should have done these on two separate pages, and I know I could just copy that and make another page, but I wanted to make the point that I feel I made the mistake because once I put this into Cricut Design Space, it caused me a problem. I'll explain that when we actually come to Cricut Design Space, but for now just be wary that two components on one piece of paper may not work. If you were again printing this out as an A4 sheet, which again is possible, I can do that and hand cut it if I wanted, it's fine, because all I'm going to do is cut the two sections in half with scissors or a paper cutter or a cutting roller or whatever you choose. And so that's fine, printing it out one piece of paper, and it's economy because I'm only using one piece of paper instead of two. But in the Cricut Design Space thing, it was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. It's easy enough to get around, so it's no big drama. So there are all my pieces. Again, and for the last time, hopefully, I will stress, I'm not an expert in Affinity Designer. If you ask me loads of questions on how do you do this in Affinity Designer, I will not have a clue. I will quite happily go off and look at other people's videos and copy that and make a video that answers your question, but you could save a lot of time and effort by looking for that video yourself and not using mine. Just saying. Okay, last thing to say in Affinity Designer, and I'm going to go back to the cover flap because it shows it best. On the right here, you can see the entire group of components. So if I click on them one at a time, they get highlighted. Here's the center horizontal line. Here's the center vertical line. Here's the cover flap main fabric text. Here's the stitch line. Here's the cut line. And what I do is I create each of these lines. I add on text to tell me what it is. That's actually redundant. I could cut that and take that out because it does nothing. What's important when we come to export, and I'll just explain how I export. So there are a couple of ways to export. I do it in File Export. You can also use the export persona on Affinity Designer 2. Don't know about 3, haven't used it. But I use File Export. When you use File Export, what happens is this. What I need to do first is select it all. So I can select it all by dragging a box around it, or I can just select each component individually, hold down the Shift key, click, 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 and that has done exactly the same and selected it all. Now I can go on to Export Persona or File Export. File Export gives me this, and what we can see here is exactly the same thing, but now you see this kind of cross-hatched grayed area around the outside. That is going to be clear, that's transparent, that's not going to come out in Design Space, but the whole box will. So what I want to do, the first thing I want to do is make that just selection only, which is going to fill my file to its limits. But there's one other important thing. Here you can see the transparent background, and here you can see that this is filled in. And that actually becomes important in the drawing process. Again, if we look over on the side here, you can see the top line, the center vertical, blah, 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 don't really show anything because they're just a black line on a black background. But here you can see this is white, and the reason for that is that it has a white fill, and that's important. And again, if I go to my cut line, it has a white fill. If you don't have the white fill and you export, let's come back to File Export. I'm only exporting one thing now. Let me just select the whole thing again. See how easy it is to forget stuff. File Export, there's the whole thing. If you don't have a white fill, or any colour you like, make it a blue fill, green fill, pink fill, I don't care. I use white because it's simple and obvious. But if you don't have a fill, then Cricut Design Space will struggle to interpret all of this. So put a fill in and your pieces will come out more or less as they do on here. Next issue, as we export, like I say, I'm exporting in SVG. Why am I exporting in SVG? Because SVG is scalable without deterioration. I don't know what the extents are, but if you export it as a picture file, like a PNG or a JPEG or a bitmap or whatever, if you want to make the file bigger, if you want to make the picture bigger, so if I wanted to make my pattern pieces bigger, the bigger you make the picture, the more the picture deteriorates. You get the pixelation thing where you end up with lots of very obvious squares in the picture. With SVG, that doesn't happen. You can scale it up and it doesn't really deteriorate. So I export in SVG. When you export in SVG, there are a couple of important things. You need to set the DPI at 72. So raster DPI 72. You need to export text as curves for font independence. Then we need to go on to the advanced section, and we need to turn off set view box. Again, we've got use DPI 72, but set view box needs to be switched off. If you don't switch off set view box, the file will export, and when you import it into Design Space, it will come out smaller than you need it. All you've got to do is size it back up to the size you need, which is partly why I've got the set box size instruction on there. But there's another reason, which I'll come to when we go into Design Space. But that's it. I can now export it. If I go to my SVG files, you can see these are all the matching pages that I've already exported, and I'm going to change the name of this, and instead of exporting it as cover flap 2, I'm going to export it as test, so that you can see once we go into Design Space what difference that makes. So I'm going to save it, and that's me done in Affinity Designer for the minute. So let's wander over to Cricut Design Space. Here you can see I've got a page. Can't remember what Cricut call it, a canvas. I've got it at 53%, so let's make it full size. There's my full size page, and as you can see, I've already imported all of my files into Cricut Design Space. But what I'll do, I'll move over here to an empty section, and I'll upload the file that I've just made. Upload image, browse, or you can drag it if you want. And here we've got test SVG. Double click on that. Upload image. Oh wow, that's a large image. It thinks it's a large image because my computer is very old and very deteriorated. And here it is. Here you can see it. I press continue. Now you can see, if you're familiar with Cricut Design Space, the import process, you can see again, this is the background, which is going to be clear, and this is going to be infilled. This is going to come out in white. And on we move. And here it is. There it is, imported in. Great, fantastic. So we're all good to go. No, we're not. Okay, on the right hand side here, a couple of things. Group is what I've just imported. Because it came in as an SVG file with everything assembled, it's come in as a group. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on that group, and I'm going to rename it before I lose it or forget what it is, and I'm going to call it test. Then I'm going to open up that group, and in there I'm going to see I've got test basic cut, which is a horizontal line. I've got test basic cut, which is a vertical line. Test, which is my text box. Test, which is my stitch line. And test, which is my pattern cut line. And they are all cut lines, which is no good. Also, we quickly skip back to Affinity Designer and I clear all the selections. Notice, if you would, my stitch line is a dotted line, and my center lines are dot and dash lines. Yet if I come back to Cricut Design Space, they're all solid black lines. Cricut does not like dotted lines. Design Space is not a fan of dotted lines at all. Quite possibly in the subscription version you can do dotted lines. I've got no clue. I'm not interested. In fact, over here on the left on these templates, I can actually see there's a dotted line there. And there are videos available that tell you how you can convert your line to dotted line, and I just, yeah, too much drama. So what I do, if I come back over here to my original imported pieces, here's the same cover flap, and what I've done here, I put my center lines as blue, I put my stitch lines as red, and if I've got a positioning line to go on or something like that, I add them as green, and I do the text to match just because I can. So I've got text there that tells me the red is my stitch line, text that tells me the blue is my center line, and the green tells me that they're positioning lines. And what I do in Design Space is I convert all of that within Design Space, because as I say, it comes in on the SVG as a cut file. So the process I go through, I've already renamed the group as test, and what I now do is I rename each individual component. Horizontal line, center. And so on and so forth. And you don't need me to type at my slow speed in front of you, so we'll skip on a second. Okay, so back in the room, and now I've got all my components renamed, but now I've got to change them because I don't want them all as cut lines, because otherwise I'm going to end up with loads of different sections. I'm going to end up with the letters cut out, which is what the Cricut is very good at, all of that sort of thing. So let's start with the horizontal center line, which I just noticed I've spelt wrong. Let's not panic about that. And up here, I'm going to convert it to a draw line, pen. I'm going to convert it to blue, because as I said, I do my center lines as blue. Then I'm going to go to the vertical center line, and I'm going to do the same thing. Blue. Then I'm going to go to the stitch line, and I'm going to do the same thing, pen, and that's going to be red. Okay, now I can convert this to pen, black, and that's all fabulous. But let me show you something. Just increase this in size to 300%, and you notice what's happened to the text. The text has turned into bubble text. It's got a mid-section, if you like, so the text is outlined, and in the middle of each letter there's a white, in this case, background, and the Cricut will interpret it exactly as that. So it will draw, or attempt to draw, the outline of the lettering. I don't like that. Maybe you do. I don't. Let's put that back to 100% and go across to my original cover flap, and you'll see these are, even if I expand them up, oh, mistake. These are single line text. Let me go right the way up to 300 again. 400, 450, 550, still single line text. No center to it. Let's go back down to 100. So what I also do, my final step, if you like, before I save that is I select that text and I move it out of the way. I then add a new text box, put that in, double click it, I go up onto, let's get that out of the way for a second, I go up onto here, I change the font size to 20, you use whatever font size you like, use whatever colour you like. But what I've done, I've set it to Cricut Sans, which is a sans serif file, and I've gone on to the style and I've set it to writing. By setting it to writing, it comes out as a single line text. And I now edit all my text and convert it to exactly the same as it says in this text box, and I put that in there. So back in the room again, and now you can see here is my information that I've copied from here and I've retyped in here. My last step is I need to make this text box part of the test group. If I look up on the right hand side here, here's my text box. I can prove that by just clicking off it so the highlighting disappears. Click on it again and there's my text box, which is great, but it's not within the test group, and it needs to be. Actually, there's two other things I need to do. So first of all, what I do is I left click on the text box, and I move it inside this group. So now that text is a part of this group. This text down here I no longer want, so again I highlight it within the group and I just press delete on my keyboard, and that has now gone. So this is now the components of the group: text, horizontal center line, vertical center line, stitch line, pattern cut line. The pattern cut line is a cut, the rest of them are draw with a pen. One last step. So I've got my group, there's my test group, that is for that entire component, but I need to attach it. I need to right click and I go attach. Again, I'm going to rename it and I'm going to call it test, because otherwise I've got all these components and I'm going to go, oh, which one's which? That is my test group. There's my pocket bag group. There's my patch pocket group interfacing. There's my front patch pocket. I'll come back to that in a second. There's my cover flap interfacing, my cover flap, and so on and so forth. So there's the original one. Here's the new one I've imported. And what I can do, just to prove it to you, if I move this across here, it sits exactly over the top because it's exactly the same size. So there's the one I imported in the first place. Here's the new one I imported as test, and it becomes one of my Cricut components. And I'm now going to delete it because I don't want it in here, because I don't want two cover flaps. Okay, that's now gone. I'm back to my original components all laid out in Cricut Design Space. Let's just shrink it down a bit so we can see it all on one page. Probably get away with 75. No, maybe not. Okay, here we are. Everything on one page. Now, cast your mind back. I said that in in Affinity Designer, where I did the front patch pocket, I did both sections on one sheet. Then when I import them into Design Space, what they do is They come out as one group, and that isn't any good. In fact, what we'll do, we'll import it again. Upload image, browse, front patch pocket. There's the SVG. You can just about see the two different sections on it. So we're going to re-import that. Open, continue, upload. Now, interesting thing. This is one I haven't updated. Let's just move that over here a minute. You see how it's tiny? This was the original reason I put the sizes on the boxes, because remember when I said about exporting, you need to set the raster DPI to 72, use DPI 72, and you need to turn off set view box. If you don't turn off set view box, what happens is exactly what I just did. I'm going to call that front patch pocket 2A. I'm going to save it again. Just made a mistake. Select all. File. Export. Raster DPI 72. Use DPI 72. Set view box is turned off. What I'm going to do right now is create a preset. Export to Cricut. So that will now be my export to Cricut, which has got a set view box off and the DPI set to 72. I've missed a step. Export selection only. Export to Cricut. So export. I'm not going to change the name of it. I'm going to call it 2A again. Save. Overwrite. Back to Design Space. Let's upload it again. Upload. Upload image. Browse. Front patch pocket 2A is the one I just made. Open. There it is. Continue. Upload. And now you can see the difference. There it is. It's just exported in, just imported in even. And it's exactly the same size as it should be in the box. And again, the reason that I originally put all the sizes on here, the set box sizes, so you see that says set box size to 230 wide by 180 high, because I work in millimeters. Cricut doesn't. Cricut works in centimeters if you set it to metric. So I need to make it 23 by 18. Set box size to 23 by 18, 230 by 180, 230 millimeters, 23 centimeters. I'm not going to teach you metric. Set to 23 by 180 or 18. That's my correct box size. My standard box size. Again, I can make the whole thing bigger if I want. But that is why I put those instructions on originally, because I didn't know how to not get it to do this, come through in a small piece. So I'm going to get rid of that and go back to this one because this is the right one. And then what I need to do is do exactly the same as I just did with the cover flap. I go into the patch pocket group and I rename all of those and I make them into draw lines and cut lines. But also, because of what I've done here, I actually need to do something else. I need to split this into two groups. So the first thing I do is ungroup that whole thing. Then I select that lot, right click and group, rename it before I lose what I'm doing, and that is patch pocket group. And then I select all this lot. Oh, I'm in the wrong place on the screen. Have I got everything? Yes, I have. And I group that and rename it as patch pocket interfacing. So now they are my two groups, and now what I need to go is into each one. I need to convert my text set to a draw line. I need to convert my center line to a draw line, rename it, do whatever I need to do to make it comparable to this. So I would, on here, I would convert my, so I'm on this, sorry, I'm on this group now. Let's open the group. I'd change that to draw line, pen. I'd change that to draw line, pen. I would change that and delete that out as I did with the cover flap. So I'd take that outside the box, put a new text box in, do it with the Cricut Sans in writing. Same with this. I would do that as a draw line in red. And the only one I would leave as a cut line is this one, because that is the one that cuts out my pattern piece. A quick mention whilst I sit here. Oh, but did you not know, Paul, you can cut fabric on the Cricut Maker? Yes, I did know. I have tried it. I don't like it. I don't like cutting my fabric directly on the Cricut Maker. I find it frays too much, where it sticks to the fabric mat. So I much prefer to cut my pattern pieces out and then put them on my cutting bench and either cut round them or mark round them and cut out the sections afterwards. I find it does less damage to the fabric. Also, the cutting process with the rotary knife, I think, is messy. It seems to create a lot of mess, a lot of dust. I mean, a lot. It's not like there's huge clouds of dust come out of it, but it makes a lot of dust on the cutting board. If you've cut fabric, you'll know this. I invested whatever it was, £30 to buy the rotary blade, and if I'd known what it does, I wouldn't have bothered, because I don't really want to use it. The only change to that is sometimes I cut the interfacing on the on the fabric mat, because the interfacing cuts quite nicely, because it's quite a densely woven material. But generally, cotton fabric particularly doesn't cut well. I don't get on with the faux leather on the cutting mat, because that creates a lot of dust on the back and a lot of bits and pieces on the cutting mat, which I then have to clean off. So I don't do it. I cut the patterns out. But if you want, you can cut out the pieces directly onto the mat using a fabric mat. But what you will need to do, if you're intending on doing that, is whichever one you're doing, you will need to go into your group and you will need to select what bits you want to cut. So if you're cutting out fabric, you don't want to draw lines over it. I mean, you can do it without not putting the pen in, but it's far easier just to switch off the visibility. So you cut, you switch that off, you switch that off. You switch that off, and all you end up with visible is the cut line. And then your Cricut Maker will only cut that shape out. It won't do any of the rest of it. And of course, I haven't altered all these to pen lines anyway, so unless you make them invisible, what it's going to do is it's going to cut all of that because they're all still cut lines. I also haven't attached them because, again, they're duplicates. So let me just get rid of them. Let me get rid of that. So here are all the ones that I prepared earlier. So there, for instance, is my pocket bag group, and it's attached because you have to attach them all. Again, if you don't attach them, what Design Space will do is interpret them all as individual bits of work, and it will put them all over your mat and it will cut a really weird thing out. So each of my sections is attached, but if we look up here, let's come back up a size, go up the top here, you'll notice that I'm at the around about the 600mm 60cm mark here. My Cricut mat is only 30cm wide, a foot wide, 30.5 actually, 305mm. So this will not fit like that on my Cricut mat. That we do not need to worry about because Design Space will figure all that out for you. But there is something important because your material size is important. So let us go to Make, click the Make button, wait a few weeks, and what we can see now is it's interpreted this as cutting on foot square or 300mm, 305mm square mats. So it's pretty much put a single cut. The last one's got 2 cuts. Yeah, all the rest of them have got a single piece per mat. Now, if you were using a material size of, for instance, A4, then you select your material size and your Design Space will figure out how to fit that component onto that A4 sheet, if it will fit. If it's too big, you have another issue. But there you go, it's figured out. You need to put your A4 sheet on that cutting mat like that, and this is how I'm going to cut it. And it will do that for all of them because I've selected A4 size paper. But I use a 600mm mat for cutting things like this. So if I go right down the bottom here, here's my 305 by 61cm mat. And we'll give it a moment. And what it's now done, it's decided now it can fit it all onto 2 mats. Great, off I go then. But I don't, because there is a further problem. My lining paper that I'm using, I can unroll it that way or that way across the mat, and I can cut a 305 or 1 foot section out of it. But it's only, in my instance, 560 mil wide, so 56 centimeters, or whatever that is in inches. It is not long enough to reach the end of the mat. I could buy 1 meter lining paper, but then the price goes up, and I'm cheapskate. And it's not a problem on this one, because as you can see, that's less than 56. But if I go on to mat 2, and I come down here, there's my 56 millimeter line, 56 centimeter line, 560 mil, and this section comes over it. So, problem. Okay, what do we do? Because there's no facility at the moment. Maybe Cricut will come with this eventually, but at the moment there's no facility to set your own custom size of material. So I have to figure this out for myself, and it is doable in this instance. If I select this and just move it to the side for a moment, then I click on this and select it, and I'm going to click on the button up to the top corner here, which is the rotate button, and I'm going to turn it through 90 degrees. If I hold the shift key down, it jumps incrementally and snaps to the right position, the right rotation. Let's just straighten that up. Okay, so that's at 90 degrees, and then I move it up to here so it fits. And now what I can do is move this up here, and it fits on my mat, because here's my 56 centimeter mark, 560 millimeters. If I bought the lining paper that's currently available in Screwfix, which is £5.09, I think, for a 20 meter roll, that's 520 millimeters. So again, that would work on this. Let's just go back onto this one. No, it won't quite work on that. So I would end up having to move stuff about, and I'd have to put this on a different mat. So what I can do then is I can click on the 3 buttons and I can go move object. If I click on move object, it gives me a choice of, okay, Paul, where do you want to move it to? And what I'd have to do is add a new mat. I can choose the color, who cares? Confirm. And now we've got it on a new mat. So here we are, mat 3, mat 2, mat 1. I don't actually want to do that, so I'm going to move it back, move object, current mat, and I want to put it back on that one, confirm. But you can move this stuff about. Although I've now got to put it back down the bottom because it's overlapped. But hopefully that makes sense, that if your material isn't featured, if it's not a standard size material, like it's not A3, tabloid, A4, whatever size standard that you're using, you can still move stuff about if you need to. Okay, let's go over to the Maker and make it. So this is my Cricut Maker 3. This is a 1 foot by 2 foot or 305 by 610 mat. The instructions on the screen will tell me which pen to load to draw the various different parts. It measures the mat and blah 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 blah. Runs backwards and forwards through a couple of times. Then I need to press the go button. You'll see at various points, although I'm going to speed this process up, you'll see at various points I'm pressing the paper back down onto the mat. Really, I should have used the strong grip mat, and I didn't, which was a fail on my part, so I had to keep pressing the lining paper down. The one big problem with the lining paper is it tends to try and return to the shape it had on the roll, sort of curl up. I improved that slightly by ironing it, which makes a little bit of difference. Anyway, let's just speed through this process, and we'll catch up again towards the end. As it runs through at 6 times speed through the beauty of LumaFusion, which is my editing suite, you'll see me change the pens and bits and pieces, and so eventually we will reach the point that it's done all the different colour lines, it's drawn in all the lines, and the last thing it does is cut out the actual shapes. Okay, it's just finishing off with the red pen, which is the final pen. There's a couple of bits to do, the outlines on that, and so I'm going to slow it down again now, because as it finishes the red pen, it will set the cutting blade into motion, which is the last function. You'll see the mat whizzes out. Now it will cut all the shapes out, and in a moment you will see the finished article, as it were. And again, you see me having to just quickly faff about and press the material or the paper back down onto the mat because it hasn't stuck down properly. My bad. And as the final cut finishes and the mat emerges from the machine, you'll see one of the sections has already fallen off screen. It's just fell down the back of the table, so I'll pick it up in a second. And this is the final article. So here is the piece that just fell out. I'll peel off the outer of the rest of the pieces, and what you can see now is that the other 3 pieces are left stuck to the mat. I'll lift them up in a moment, and then I repeat the entire process with mat 2, which gives me my remaining pattern pieces. And then conveniently, by editing magic that skipped to the end, I've got the mat out of the machine. I'm just going to cover it up again to stop too much rubbish getting on it. And then I will put down all the pattern pieces and you can see what the finished article looks like. Here's the second mat's worth. And they are all my sections. So again, what I've got here is the pattern pieces are the cutting size of the specific fabric. I've got notes on each pattern piece of what the fabric is and how many I need to cut. I've got the positioning lines and centre lines all marked out, and that's what I'm looking for. I've no idea whether that fits in with the conventional build of a sewing pattern, but it works for me. I understand it, and so if it works for you, go ahead, steal the idea. And there you have it, project complete. Unfortunately, it's an hour of your time plus that you won't ever get back, so my apologies for that. But like I say, if you have stuck right the way through to the end, thank you so much for doing so. I really do hope it's been of help to you, because that's all I'm doing these for. If you've got questions, like I say, stick them in the comments below, or head over to oldmanwith.com and stick them on the ask a question function. You can do that without signing up to YouTube for a channel subscription or whatever, and there's no subscription needed on my web page. It's just a facility for you to get a message to me if you want to, and some other random blog posts and goodness knows what else are over there. I should not extend this video any further by waffling on continuously. So, as always, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.